Hello, welcome everyone to this channel. I Today I am going to explain you about the EVNG, how to use the EVNG to deploy any simple topologies and the complex topologies of any network design outside the world in your lab. So this is the tool which I am more familiar. I've been using it to deploy multiple topologies from any of the customer scenario, any of the real world scenario in your lab to verify it and use it. So if we go inside it, before that I'm just giving you a heads up on this, the credentials part after the installation. So if you're going to install it the regular version from EVNG's website, so it's very easy to use the credentials, like the admin is the user to access it, and the password by default is Eve. So then you have the three selection console types. I usually use the HTML5 so that I can use each level of console. So you have the explanation for each type of console based on what softwares you are going to use, because the connections can be of different types. So once you get login inside the EVNG, you will find there are many top level views which you can see only in the admin, but you can at the user level you will have certain level of views. In addition to that, you can find the folders section here, where you can find different folders. By default you will find shared running, and you can create your own folders if you would like that. Like if I'm going to create, I can create a new folder where you can create that user test one internally. Once you get into the folder, you can create your new lab by creating a new lab scenario. So here I'm giving a test lab setup. So it will connect on any of the cluster. uh, that's why I selected any. Author you can provide if you would like to provide the author to yourself, and you can provide the description and summary if that is required for your configuration. So I created this lab. Now I can directly get into that lab after creating the lab. So here now we are in the lab to create the lab environment. So firstly we have a certain level of interfaces, so which we have connected. So by default we have a management interface, which is your host interface connected to the network. So if you see, I'll select the type as cloud 0, which is management interface. To represent this interface, I'm using cloud png file so that it's in network. I can give a name as management network, right? So by using this, I can include the management network interface. So once we have the management interface, though, we know this network is directly connected to your lab network with the underline the machine where it is deployed. So it will be in the same network range. So now you can start using any additional machines which would you like to include. So in my case, I'm using one of them is VOIS, which is open source router with the latest version of VOS 1.4 rolling update. It's consuming default configurations with vital memory and for Ethernet connections, and it will be running on master cluster. And the main concern is using the console type. So you can select the console type. By default I use a VNC because I have the configurations being done for the VNC to use it. So I am selecting most of the time is the VNC for this network. And it's already the VOIS is a router, so it selected the router configuration to include it. So once you added this, it simply get included in your lab. You can connect this. So now we know it has a 4 interfaces. You can connect one of the interface to your management interface. So you can select the interface which you would like to select. So by default it's connecting with ETH 0, and your device is connected to that machine. On the other hand, you can also include any number of intermediate routers. According to your configuration, you can install any number of devices in between. So I'm taking any VPCs virtual PC internally to connect and to share the information about it. So I am just including this as the end device, from where I'm creating the network to the any external world. So now you can connect this VPC device with VOS second interface, which will be ETH1. So we have VPC with ETH0 interface. We have uh, VOIs connected to the ETH1. So we know now we are connected something like that. So we have four interfaces on VOS. ETH0 is connected to management interface, which is required to connect to the internet, and ETH1 is connected to the VPC device, which is connected internally in the lab. I can rename this VPC device to my personal computer to make it more easier. And it's not updated. Let me recheck. Yeah, so there is a concern like the name should be in uh, without space. So I am just including personal hyphen computer to get included. And similarly for VOS, you can provide a router name. So you can define it as a router or something if you are into if you are from CCNA or CCNP or IC CCNA or high level of certifications background. You can find like in that analogy, people are using R1, R2 and R3, something like that, for the routers to differentiate between the different routers. So I am taking it as a R1. So once these devices are connected, you can start these router and you can start personal computer. So now you can figure this out, like your machines are up and you can connect to these machines using VNC. This will bring up the router, and similarly we will have VPC brought up. So if you check IP details, it will require certain set of details to configure the IP address, and also you can configure it using the DHCP. So that option is also available. So that option is based on this router. So now you know two things. One is we have end client, which is personal computer. We have the VOS, which we can it as which we call it as an internet router, and this is the management interface, which will be your lab network where you are connected the host machine, and ultimately that lab is connected to the internet. So in this way you can define these connections, but you have defined the connections, but these connections are not working now. You need to configure each machine to work in the order you would like to do so. To do that, you need to configure VOS first, and to configure VOS you need to go back and read about the VOS configuration page to configure it. So you can use so if you are from the routing background or a network background, definitely you are aware of, like even the Cisco routers, any router uses the config mode and the run mode. So by default you are always in config mode. So default credentials for VOS is VOS and VOS as the user and password. In when you logged in, you are in a running mode. In a running mode you can see what all config you are running right now. So it has this configuration, and to configure the interfaces you need to go back and go into the config mode and set your configurations accordingly what you require. So this is based on the IP addressings. So if you want ETH0 to get the IP through DHCP, and that's only possible if you have this network management and network uh, connected to the DHCP server, where you can get the IP using the DHCP request. So you can configure VOS to get the DHCP based on these configurations, and similarly you can also configure it for static. That you can check on their website how to do it statically, assign the IP address to a interface. So this is what we call it as a connection between ETH0 to management interface. Once you configure it, you can test using the ping command to check the ping test for management interface, and also for the 8.8.8 machine to verify it. In on the second hand, so now VOS is connected, this router is connected to the internet, to the lab network through ETH0 interface, but personal computer is still not connected to the internet, not even the router part. So to configure the personal computer, you firstly need to configure the ETH0 ETH1 interface of the router. In the similar way what we did it for the ETH0, we need to configure it on the ETH1. But as normally in the network world, you cannot use the same IP addressings across two networks. So router is having two broadcast domain, right? So based on your network fundamentals, you need to use the different subnet range on the ETH1, so that you can communicate and bridge the ETH1 interface to the ETH0. So to do so, you can select your IP range, private IP address range, or any of your range, and configure ETH1 just like the way we did it for ETH0, to do some validations on the top of that. So once we did that, now ETH1 is configured, ETH0 is already connected. Now coming back to personal computer. So personal computer requires two type of configurations. One is static, one is public. I'll explain about the static right now. We can configure public automatic as well using a DHCP, but for that we need a DHCP to be configured on the interface. But if we have statically configured IP addresses on ETH1 interface, so I'll explain about the static IP range. So you can take the so it's simply ask for the IP address, mask, and gateway. So gateway will be, in this case, is your ETH1 interface IP, and IP address will be in that subnet range which you selected for ETH1, and mask will be the mask of the network which you defined on the ETH1. So this will be your network step to configure the personal computer. Once you did that, you can test using the ping to ping this IP, ETH1 IP. It will ping the ETH1 IP, but it will not ping your management network IP or even the internet. The reason is we have the connection from ETH0 to ETH1, but that traffic is not forward to ETH0. To do so, we need to do the netting on VOS. So I'll just give you the other things on the requirement. Thank you everybody.